And welcome back to the Oopa Loopa Cafe here in our last segment for today, Friday the 18th of January 2013. Funny how things go by you so fast. Well, I had a conversation this week with Chris Suttner, who is one of the main folks, or the main folk, at the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Unfortunately, the recording of that conversation kind of went awry. I can't play both parts, so I'll just convey to you the important information. We had a conversation about Edgar Allan Poe, his history, some of the derogatory things that were written about him that were certainly untrue. He wasn't a cokehead, he wasn't an opium head, and he wasn't much of a drinker even. But he could certainly write some very, very dark fiction. He wrote mostly poetry, one novel, kind of a novella. And he was disparaged after his death, when he couldn't even defend himself, by a person that kind of went head to head with him while he was in life. Told you all that so I could tell you this. Tomorrow is his birthday, Edgar Allan Poe's birthday, not Chris's. And they're having a birthday party for him at the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Lasts from noon until midnight, and they will have some plays and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. Pageant might be more accurate, as well as some sales of books and whatnot. You can also see a lot of the furnishings even that were there when Poe lived there. Anyway, Edgar Allan Poe Museum, Richmond, Virginia. There are also some other events going on in town that are kind of related, so if you're in Virginia on Saturday the 19th, go wish Ed happy birthday for me. Now, in the news, wrapping up this week, Germany is about to bring all its gold home, or most of its gold home. After World War II, when part of Germany was occupied by the Soviet Union and part of it was occupied by the Western Allied powers, Germany's gold was taken elsewhere. A lot of it went to France, a lot of it went to the United States for safekeeping, of course. Now they want it back because they don't feel like there's a Russian threat, Soviet threat, and they don't feel like, well, actually they don't feel like much of anybody can touch them right now. And economically, they're probably correct, with the exception of Russia. The United States is in no position to say, no, you can't have your gold back. First of all, the United States doesn't have that gold. It might be within the United States, but the United States itself does not have the German gold, despite what they're saying. It's actually the Federal Reserve Bank of New York that has the German gold. So, and they have most of our gold as well. That's an entirely different story that we'll discuss here in a moment. So Germany is bringing home all their gold. Of course, they've gone to the euro now. They're no longer on the Deutschmark, in theory. But the number of euros that they can have and issue and spend and use is independent, in theory, of the amount of gold they actually have in their gold reserve. Nice theory. Not the case. Not in reality. Same thing here. Yeah, we're not on the gold standard. And yet, for the $16.4 trillion that we already owe somebody else, we only have about $150 billion in gold as security against those loans, which is where we get to the next part of this story. The debt ceiling has been exceeded. Well, no, not exceeded. That's not exactly right. It has been topped out. We can't borrow any more money legally. We being Congress, we being the United States government, can't borrow any more money unless Congress votes to raise the debt ceiling. We ran out of money New Year's Eve. We ran out of money last year. But the government is still operating thanks to some fancy bookkeeping by our Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Gaitner, who said, okay, well, we still got $150 billion in the pension fund. So the United States government, for the last 2.5 weeks, has been operating off of the pension fund of federal employees. Now, I know a few of those folks. Their checks probably are not going to be interrupted this week. But here's the real deal. This is the real thing, what I perceive to be the reason that we're actually paying the national payroll out of what they already paid as payroll and put into pension. This will allow the administration to hold Congress over the barrel so that you either raise the debt ceiling or you get rid of all our guns. Can't have both. If the debt ceiling cannot be met, then the pension fund will run out in about 7 months. That's my calculations, and I'm no accountant. But it's pretty easy to figure when you get 4.5 million people on. Never mind. It won't last long. Also, if the debt ceiling is not raised, we can't borrow more money, and we don't have any money, then we would have to sell what little gold is still in the Strategic Metals Reserve, Fort Knox, in order to kind of almost keep up our bills. When I say our bills, I'm talking about the United States government. And by the way, I didn't sign any loan papers for any of that stuff, and I don't think you did either. The United States government has chosen to put itself, and therefore all of us, into debt for $16.4 trillion. That's 16,000 billion dollars. That's an unfathomable amount of money. And which brings us to the other point. If I were going to, say, be the chief accounting officer of a corporation, even one of the big Wall Street banks, and I couldn't pay my bills because I couldn't borrow any more money anyplace, and I went to raid the pension fund of the rest of the bank officers and bank employees, I would be in jail. Apparently Mr. Gaitner thinks he's immune from that, and he probably is. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and a banker, or me, would end up in jail for such shenanigans. That kind of fancy footwork on bookkeeping is, wait, that's what Bernie Madoff did, right? Fancy footwork on bookkeeping? Yeah, thought so. So, oh, and the other thing is Mr. Gaitner doesn't like to pay his own income taxes. That he acknowledges that it was an error in accounting. Hang on, he's our Secretary of Treasury. Wow. So, handbasket on its way, I think. So it's going to be a trade-off. This is going to get really interesting. Machiavelli would be very, very, very proud of this move. You can either raise the debt ceiling and lose all of your credibility within even your own party. That's for the Republican side. Or you can acquiesce to the gun confiscation scheme that's underway and lose all credibility with your own party. And either way, you lose all credibility with the American people. Except that none of this was started by those folks on that side of the aisle. The $16.4 trillion, most of it came about because of folks in the Congress on the other side of the aisle back from 1992 up until at least 2008, and an unchecked checkbook. Nobody kept score. Nobody seemed to care that our great grandchildren are already in debt. So, what does that mean for the country? Well, some big changes. We'll either borrow more money so that 3 or 4 more generations are in debt, or the country defaults. Wow, what a thought. What an experiment that would be. If the United States would default on its loans, then several things would happen. Wall Street would completely crash, which it's already on its last legs. If you've been watching closely, the stocks got some gains, but when you look at who's selling, it's all the people who already have all the money they need. They don't need to make any more off Wall Street. They'll go invest it in, oh, I don't know, German gold maybe. Almost certainly, in fact. Or Russian oil. Or Chinese oil and gas. But they won't be investing in U.S. stocks after probably today. Maybe never ever again. That's not my doom and gloom thing. That's an observation. Everybody from Rupert Murdoch on down has sold off their U.S. stocks. They're buying a few on the Far East exchanges. They're buying just a little bit in the European exchanges. But they're shifting their focus elsewhere. So with the U.S. people, well, we get to take it the hard way either way, or any way, because there are actually 3 or 4 permutations on this. We will lose, almost certainly, we'll lose either our ability to balance a checkbook. Oh wait, it's not even our checkbook, and nor is it our spending. Or we will lose our Second Amendment rights. Okay, they're already whittling on the 4th, 5th, 10th. Just that pesky second one, still in the way of a complete autonomous federal government. I don't know what'll happen. I don't think any of it will be good, to be quite honest. If you have a differing opinion, please feel free to let me know that. You can write to oopaloopacafe@gmail.com, or you can go to facebook.com/oopaloopacafe. Log in, give me your thoughts, suggestions, gripes, comments, whatever, and I will certainly bear witness that you have done that. I'm certainly no pundit on this, but I am fairly good at watching the signs of what's happening. And it is some really, really good machinations. And that machinations comes from Machiavelli, by the way. Even Frederick the Great would be proud on this one. And he was crazy as, well, he was nuts. But he was very proficient at manipulating people, as is the current administration. I got to give them credit for that. They're very, very good at that. So, if you want to maintain any of your riches, I would suggest buying, I don't know, General Electric, because they're sure not going to go broke under this administration. They're part of it. Anyway, this is Rick Osmond, and this is the Oopa Loopa Cafe for Friday the 18th of January 2013. Another announcement. Starting next Monday, this show will be dropping back to 1 hour per day instead of 2, because as you can see, the bag's under my eyes. This is just way too much work for me. So I'm dropping it back to an hour weekdays, And I will also be mounting these up on YouTube so that you can, if you miss, a daily, you can find it in the archives on YouTube. Also, I'm still on the search for someone to kind of help out with the hosting stuff. Now, sitting here, well, it would be kind of crowded, but we have the advantage of being able to do it via internet and webcam and stuff. So feel free to drop that into oopaloopacafe@gmail.com if you'd like to be a part of this show. Permanent, semi-permanent, occasional, however you think you could do that, feel free to get a hold of me. Also, last announcement. I have a movie role in a minor independent film. It'll be in Florida. Shooting date happens to coincide with MegaCon, which will be held in Orlando that same weekend. So I'll get to go meet Neil Adams and a few of the other high-end comic book artists all in the same weekend that I'm actually becoming a movie star. Hey, they're going to put me in the movies. Okay, maybe not. Well, they are going to put me in the movies, but they may not make a star out of me. Rick Osmond, Oopa Loopa Cafe. We'll see you next week.
Yes.